I told you so. For those who may or may not know, I got in a lot of drama 3 to 4 months ago when I returned to WUA because most of my content made on it was negative since the Annie was incredibly underwhelming and had many issues with it, right? And although this wasn't exactly what got me in drama, what happened after was, right? In which I came across the Gacha podcast for a lot of big WUA creators talking about the anniversary live stream, and there was a lot of deflection going on for all the criticisms brought up for it, and instead all they do is constantly compare it to Genshin or Hoyo games to make themselves feel better about how underwhelming the Annie was, right? By the way, less than 10 pulls more than an average patch for the anniversary, no 5-star, Zanny and Phoebe on the same phase, Cartethia and Chacona back-to-back banners. You also had SK's banner being shortened right before the Annie. There was a lot of shit, the night market too, blah 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 blah, right? And I then came across another podcast in which they talked about HSR's Annie livestream, and they held nothing back and completely shit on HSR, which I found understandable, although they were really over-exaggerating how bad it was. But it's understandable, right? Because HSR's Annie, I can 100% see how someone didn't like it. My issue was the double standards with how they treated HSR being underwhelming and WUA being underwhelming, right? So I made a video on this saying that I'm quite sick of biggest WUA content creators. Instead of just criticizing the game for the flaws and its fuck-ups, they instead go straight to comparing it to Hoyoverse games and stoop down to the level of the games they constantly make fun of, so in a way to make WUA look better than it actually is, right? And at the time, Tectone reacted to my video, called me an unemployed beggar when I mentioned the Annie wishes, and alongside this said that comparing Hoyoverse to WUA is healthy, he encourages it, and a lot of his YouTube content around WUA, or just gacha in general, has been just comparing it to Hoyoverse or shitting on Hoyoverse games, right? And today, a stream clip has come out now that he's starting to phase out of WUA, just like he did with Genshin, just like he did with HSR. He's now phasing out, and he says the WUA community is too toxic positive, and all they do these days is compare it to Hoyoverse games. Wow. I wonder why that's the way it is, and what CCs encouraged it that I called out 3 to 4 months ago, right? So, your boy, unsurprisingly, given time, was completely correct, right? And this isn't a video to stroke my ego or to shit on Tectone, because no matter what I say about Tectone, the guy has such a large fan base, he's always going to have dedicated viewers who continue supporting him no matter what, right? But this is more so to be targeted towards the gacha community, or the WUA community specifically, which is, what the fuck did you guys think was gonna happen? I literally told you this in my crash out video at the end. Stop letting big CCs make your opinions for you simply because you find it easier to agree with their biased takes because you're also biased, right? This is not gonna end well. And as always, it doesn't end well. People should be looking to CCs who are as honest as they can find, instead of CCs who get sponsored and are very clearly biased and encouraging tribalism so they can farm as much engagement as possible, right? I'm even seeing upcoming WUA content creators, and I say upcoming lightly because they have more subs than me, yet get less views than me whenever they don't compare WUA to Hoyoverse or don't glaze WUA, right? If they just make a normal ass video, all their videos do worse than some of my worst videos, right? And then the second the views are low, they just go back to criticizing, Hoyo games or comparing Hoyo to WUA, and all of a sudden their videos fucking blow up again, right? For some reason, it is a very common trend these days for, content creators coming up from the WUA space who don't exactly want to be guide makers. They simply go into opinionated content, which there's nothing wrong with that, as that's what I do, but instead of actually talking about mainly the game itself, it's just constant comparison and shitting on other games to prop up Wuwa, which is incredibly unhealthy, which I have been saying for a long time now, right? So, I was right. And many other creators were right as well. However, that's it. I'm not going to go any further into this, right? At the end of the day, I expected this to happen, and it did happen, right? It's not anything special. So let's talk a little bit about the recent video I made with Augusta and Yuno and my polling plans, right? So I wanted to add this segment in here, one, so annoying people don't react to it, and two, because I think it might matter to a lot of people. So there is a current leak on, the kits of Yuno, obviously. I talked about it before, where her outro has a massive 50% heavy attack amp, which is huge, right? It's absolutely huge for, any heavy attack damage dealers. However, there's something else in her kit for specifically Augusta pullers I would like to bring up for you guys, right? So there is someone who has read through the kit of both Augusta and Yuno. I haven't read Augusta's yet, so keep in mind, take this with a grain of salt, though it's pretty much guaranteed. This person talks about Yuno's crit damage buff, and in which they say Yuno's crit damage buff is up to 60% with 10 stacks. Applies to active resonator in the zone she deploys, not Yuno only. However, the catch is that the stack count is reset when switching to a resonator. So the 10 stacks you build up on Yuno will drop back down to 0 the second you switch to another resonator. And you need to stack it up to 10 again to get that 60% crit damage buff. Augusta has a passive that lets her gain a small shield every 0.8 seconds. Why does this matter? You wouldn't believe it. Each stack that builds up to the crit damage is whenever a resonator gains a shield, right? And no, you can't switch to Yuno and go back to Augusta by building up shields on Yuno. Once again, that doesn't work. So Augusta purposely has this random ass passive in her kit that refreshes a shield for her every 0.8 seconds so that she can be synergistic completely with Yuno and not only get the heavy attack amp, but also a 60% crit damage buff, right? So there you go. I believe Augusta is probably the only heavy attack DPS that can take advantage of this in the entirety of the game. The 60% crit damage buff Yuno will provide, since she just has it in her kit. She randomly gets some small ass shield every 0.8 seconds, right? So for Augusta pullers, highly recommend pulling Yuno. 100% going to be that third slot, and currently QU1 is leaked as a Electro Rectifier character, I believe, meaning he'll likely be the, actual best in slot support for Augusta, and the full best in slot Augusta team will be Augusta, QU1, and as well as Yuno all together, right? So Augusta, she looks absolutely sick. I really love those fighting mechanics and, animations I've seen. However, keep that in mind, if you want Augusta, is 100% a must recommend from me. And of course, she fills that sustain slot, which is even better because this now allows you to free up your shorekeeper for another team, right? So that's that. I just wanted to quickly touch up upon, how everything, all that drama I went through 4 months ago is coming back full circle. And this new little bit of info of Kuro continuing to make supports incredibly niche for one specific DPS, right? I don't want to rub too much salt in the wound because I've covered this many times already. If you really care about my opinion a lot about predatory shit in Wuwa, you can watch my second last video on it, right? Talking about Wuwa isn't different, but I don't think there's any point in constantly bringing this shit up over and over again. The same way in HSR, when something predatory happens, I usually won't mention it with team archetypes unless it's like something insane, right? Is the same way I want to treat Wuwa. There's no point in mentioning it over and over again because nothing's going to change, right? So highly recommend Yuno for any Augusta pullers. Augusta looks so fucking sick, man. I just can't afford that full best in slot team, right? Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.